if we just warm up the room, because we're all fresh, we're going to do star aerobics. No, we're not. No, but we're going to actually welcome and thank the Rebanks, because these kids are an example of what pure food and farming does for the next generation. So welcome to the Rebanks, everybody. Yay. Thank you. Don't be shy now. Be like your dad. Don't be shy. So Helen and I just decided we would have just a good old chat, like we're around your kitchen table or my kitchen table. Mine's a bit wobbly. But I'll hand you, this is Helen's book. It is her debut. So that in itself is spectacular. Yes, congratulations, really seriously. It's like having a baby. You probably don't understand that concept, James. I know you've written books, but I had a book, Jillaroo, in 2002, then a baby, then a book, then a baby, and then more books. But Helen's book, The Farmer's Wife, came out when it's released this year.
It came out in August 23, and it came as a paperback this year, earlier on in the year. Little bit for you. And I have had the most incredible journey with this book so far, and it's brilliant to be with you, Rachael, because look, we've both written the same title, The Farmer's Wife, and we're here today in Tasmania celebrating these two books, celebrating women that do the doing of the family life on these farms. And how brilliant to be with you, because the first introduction I had to your book was when my publishers put this on Amazon, and that's a big deal. Like, we don't care about Amazon at all in the grand scheme of things, but as an author, when you can search up your book on that page and see it for the first time and start to think that this is actually happening, you haven't just been typing away in your bedroom and then sending some pages and documents to your editor. When you see the cover on an actual website for sale, it slightly freaks you out. But underneath this, when I searched up The Farmer's Wife, was Rachael's book, and that was way back, 23, early 22. So I had a funny moment in that a friend came over for a coffee, and she said, "Oh, I got your book for a birthday present." And I started reading it, and my husband bought it, but I realised it wasn't your name on the cover, but I started reading it, and it was about a sex toy party. And sorry, boys. And we were sitting having coffee, and she was like, "I know you didn't write this, but my goodness, I couldn't stop turning the pages." So she'd put my book to one side, and she was well into Rachael's. And we had such a laugh about it. I was like, I've got to read this book. So it's definitely a page turner, and we've had a good laugh. But tell me about your work and you know, how you've got into like writing fictional stories that are set on farms, and what you're trying to do, connecting people up to, you know, with stories, rural stories.
Yeah, well, I started out, I'm a farm girl, and I run a direct sell business. Ripple Farm Landscape Healing Hub is our 100-acre farm where we teach natural sequence farming and other aspects of farming, and children as well. But I started out, my grandmother was a writer, and she wrote back in the 1950s, and she was published in an Australian magazine called The Bulletin, and it was quite risque. It was about a love triangle where the woman is a fur trapper. She's a skinner in the highlands of Tasmania, which is kind of where our forebears have come from. And so I just assumed I'd be a writer, and you just wrote a book. But I studied agriculture. I wasn't allowed to do farm management because of my gender. I had to do business administration, so because women weren't managers of farms. And so I wrote a book called Jillaroo, and it carved out an entire genre in the Australian publishing industry. That was in 2002. Yay. And it was to get rural women on the page, the ones that are actually butchering sheep, working dogs, moving livestock, and feeding the family. So there's always been that theme. And The Farmer's Wife is a sequel to Jillaroo after I tried to implement regenerative practices on my family farm, and my father decided that my husband and he would stay on the farm and the children and I had to leave. So again, this gender situation. So The Farmer's Wife is an unravelling really of a women's fairy tale, and it is the start of the regen ag movement. This has the work of pasture cropper Colin Syce in it. It's and the sex toy party, that was an intro into the world of women. Yeah, and it is. We actually had one in our district. We've got a really remote district. There was it was hilarious, and so absolutely. So a lot of what's on the page, it was in it's and I have just there were 18 kids in the school where we went to. So the sex toy party was a big thing. So all the husbands were going, what do you want to buy that for? And it was just priceless. But I wanted to reveal, the secret life of women, farm women. We're funny and we're clever. Yes. And I just have to say, reading your version of The Farmer's Wife, I was crying because I felt seen for the first time in some non-fiction work. So I just want to thank Helen, because I cook from scratch for my kids and do the outside stuff as well, and I know exactly what it's like. So can you tell me how the book started?
How it came about. So I'm married to an author, and I spend a lot of time reading books and his writing, and I pore over all the pages and probably and I love stories, and I've always read, and I've always had a creative flair, and I am entirely proud of being that support role in the family. So it's a combination of things that led to this being in my hands today, which essentially started with me probably feeling quite frustrated with the world of modern, life, really. Media, films, TV, anything on the radio that was representing women on farms, but only the women doing the outside work. And I think there's just a bit of, I'm coming from a long line of women that call themselves farmers' wives and are extremely proud of that role. And modern life tells us that caring and cooking and looking after our families is something that we should leave behind and go and do something else more shiny. And I wanted to write started with the recipes to leave a bit of a legacy for the kids, but I wanted to write something much deeper and something more real and true about what it feels to be me, because I couldn't find that book on the shelves. And I think I'd spent my 10,000 hours, working over documents with James and understanding the writing process from an insider's point of view. And because the publishing industry is quite daunting when you're a newcomer to it. How do you get a book deal? How do you need an agent? What does an agent do? How do you submit, different stages of manuscripts and the processes through? And so I was really, really deep into that, and I knew all of that. But I hadn't written anything in my own words since I'd done a dissertation in my 20s for my art degree, which was a really weird theme. But I did some embroideries for the practical work, and I had to write a dissertation. And so I started writing a piece about marmalade making with my grandma and my mum and me. And it sounds all cosy and rosy in the kitchen and the pan bubbling and sticky mess and oranges and juice, and how does this process work? And once I locked into my memories of making that piece of writing for me was about the dynamics of the relationship in that kitchen between my grandma, who was a really tough old farmer's wife in the real sense of the word, that ran that kitchen. She was one of 8 kids and always had a life on the land and knew that kitchen like the back of her hand, knew how things run and did things without explaining anything. And my mum, who wasn't from a farming background, that came in, and here's me as a little girl standing trying to figure it out, and mum kind of scurrying around trying to please her mother-in-law in the kitchen that she was going to take over as that mum and dad moved into the farmhouse. And once I looked into the relationships of these two women and my own place in it, I started to question through the bits of writing, why have I chosen essentially to live a life like my grandma, to spend days picking up after everybody else, running around, cooking, cleaning, preparing food, making the beds, cleaning the bathrooms, working out, homework schedules and doctor's appointments, and also being the woman that keeps this guy in front of us on, keep him going with all the things that the farm requires. And I'd done it with an open heart and a strong will and determination that work mattered. And as I wrote this, I realised that work that I think matters isn't represented in many places. So I went deep on it. I shared really personal stories in a sense that I didn't imagine it would be such a personal memoir in the end. It was recipes and stories from the farm. And when I, reading, Rachel's work, if I'd gone there in my stories, I think my parents might have just... it's very different in British sort of society to even... That's different, made him feel very uncomfortable. I've described giving birth. That nearly tipped him over the edge. But birth, life, death, these things matter to us all. Relationships matter, and how we hold a family together matters. And I absolutely believe that it's how important it is to celebrate that whoever's doing that role in the household, and to value that work and not run away from it and say there's something else to be doing more important. And that's not to say that women can't do all sorts of things, or men. It shouldn't be gendered. I'm raising my boys to hopefully learn all the skills that you need to run a household as well.
Oh, thank you. Yes, well, I have children at sort of at the other end. They're 19 and 21, and you can really see the value that's come from me choosing to be a person that cooks from scratch. My kids know how to cook, and I supply our regenerative Dexter beef and mutton to Tasmanian Produce Collective, which is an online farmers market, and it's a fortnightly cycle. And I'm a volunteer, so this is how contraband food, pure food, is in this state. I deliver to our customers fortnightly at the back of my ute in a car park in a rural town. And there's a politician on every corner of that crossroad in our town. But I still have to deliver pure food, like I'm dealing kale, right? Kale without chemicals, my goodness. And that's quite an exhausting cycle to do every fortnight. It's lots of lugging. But I do it because I access pure food from all over Tasmania, and I can throw it all together for my children. And it's value adding for the future, and it's so bloody important. And I think your book, I just want to congratulate you for being so brave, because to read those childbirth experiences, I think, is really super important for all of humanity. We've been removed from the birth process, men and women, and the sacredness of it. And also too the whole concept of breastfeeding, natural birth, or the microbiome that we're going to remove from our children's lives if we don't do those things. So Helen's book is extraordinary and we were talking about it outside, weren't we, Helen? That James has been banging the drum. That two books out, and he's done spectacularly well from a publishing standpoint and getting a message across. But Helen's book links everybody in the sense that it's food, it's cooking, it's children. So people in urban areas can pick it up and go, oh my goodness, I need to rethink this. And that's what the gift is in Helen's book. And that raw nature of birth, but also how brave you are with the English culture, because we're bloody convicts down here, and I'm Tassie as mate, and I don't give a shite, right? I don't give a manure. Anyway, I'm sorry, boys.
No, just picking up on that, Rachel. But like I've done a lot of book talks in the UK, and it's been quite unusual to have a queue of people coming to me crying and hugging me, going, thank you for writing this. I feel seen and heard. But also just that, I don't even think some of the bits of that person, we all go through these things. And I worked with an editor that was super, super respectful and kind, and just said, right from the heart, pour it out, put it on the page what you want to share with the world, and we'll edit and we'll work through it, and we'll get to the point where you're happy. And it was just such a brilliant process. But touching on the food element of that, so I wanted to share what a woman's story was looking after the home and the family, but I wanted to connect whoever's doing the shopping for the food to the soil, and talk about it actually comes from farms, because people just are so disconnected and think that food is coming from the supermarket in packets or in a cafe. And we've just been in London several times recently, and it's so busy, and people aren't respecting the basics of life and nourishing themselves properly. And the stats that are coming out about ultra processed food and what the damage it's doing to our bodies, like Felice yesterday talking about mental health, and how simple changes to your diet, taking out some of the processed things. And I'm sharing them. I'm not perfect on this. We're raising 4 kids. We're really, a busy family. We can't avoid the Kit Kats all the time, or the Mars bars and the drinks, fizzy drinks. We're not doing it perfectly, but what I do is cook from scratch, and I consider the meat that we get and the vegetables and the staples of our diet is the best that it can be, and we try and source good dairy produce. We've got an absolute hero in this room sitting here that's just arrived from the UK last night, who, if you get a chance to speak to Sophie Gregory today, you must, because Sophie is on a Nuffield scholarship around the world at the moment, and she's a huge advocate for organic dairy produce in regenerative ways. And her and her husband Tom farm in Dorset, Devon border, and it's a beautiful place, and they look after that herd of cows exceptionally well, and they produce some of the most amazing milk. And it's a joy to have her here. Milking Time book, yeah.
It's exactly what you're saying.
Oh my goodness, there's lots of links, isn't there?
Yes, Ardent Seed, who do multi-species.
Anybody else got a book with a great title? But no, I'd love it. But putting these, we're just trying to share stories about food, family, life, women's stories, women that don't get represented. It's all the connections of things, and just super excited to be here and doing this. So far away from home, but it feels like family. Feels like I'm with a huge group of friends, all on the same page, that we're all passionate and caring about making change in the world.
And it's funny you say it feels like family, because I read about your lifestyle and what you cook, and I'm going, I'm best friends with my slow cooker, right? And you can pack, like I would take my slow cooker to bed with me, and partly because my house is freezing, but. Yes, we've segued back. There's a marketing concept. Anyway, but you're going to write that down. You've got 5 what? Oh, yeah, she's got 5 slow cookers. So the people who have snuck in, they have no idea that this conversation. You'll have to watch the replay. But now, speaking of funny, Helen's book is funny, and it's also, you made me cry. I mean, you spoke of it yesterday. You made me cry when you realised, like when you at your the grandmother's funeral, and you realised, you know, what is going to be your legacy. And you know, I'm the same. If I've left good, kind humans on the planet that know how to grow food and honour Mother Nature, then I've done my work. But the other thing, it is funny. I just wanted to read something about this, and I related this, that like it's a beautiful record of your children's lives, and the writing, because you know me, it's my vocation as well as regen farming. But this section just got me. So you're at the supermarket, right? And we all know I avoid the supermarket like the plague. And your kids are wanting a ride, okay? And sorry if it's referencing you. They I think it was B, actually. It was B, yeah. They watch a child laughing as the boy bumps up and down in Daddy Pig's shiny red car, and B starts to howl as if someone has cut her arm off. And I just thought that is so wonderful. But seriously, our supermarkets are designed to trap us and trap mothers. And also too, like when I researched milking time, and that was not shameless promotion, Ardent Seeds, who do multi-species mixes in Tasmania. But milking time is basically, it's a reclamation and it's a rebellion novel, and it because that came about because people are getting so sick, but they hook our kids from birth on the baby food. It's got the perfect measure of salt, sugar, fat to get them in the addiction loop, and the scientists are paid big money to keep them in the addiction loop. So like you, we have to be really conscious, and I'm talking to a room of people who are really conscious. But in terms of my children, I would, get the pumpkin and I'd puree it, and then I'd put it in the freezer, and then I'd get apples from the tree, and everything was chem-free, and then I'd mix them up, hideous garlic drinks, and they'd drink it as a medicinal thing. And now my son, who's 19, he goes through drive-through Maccas. But at least I have the foundation. So we're going to have we were going to have a very serious sciencey talk, no, but I'll pull back to the bravery of writing this book, where I remember being up on stage and saying that women really need to reconnect with the food, and I had quite a bit of a feminist backlash because we've spent so many times emancipating women from the kitchen, and I remember I've been lucky enough to be mentored by Dr. Fred Provenza. Who knows Dr. Fred? He's a dear friend I've read one of his manuscripts early on, but his book Nourishment, that taught me about education. And in my flock of sheep, I have generations, and so those mothers are teaching their babies to eat and digest and source all the food that they need. And I liken my livestock to my kids, and so I've tried to adopt that. But that whole nutritional wisdom does come from our kitchens and the people buying our food. And also too, just a confession, I've trained I loved Brambles, your beautiful dog. So you meet Helen and James's dogs in the book, and I'm a dog fan, absolutely. And I've made sure, a Kelpie trainer, I've made sure I've trained my kids the same way. So it's praise, and then a boundary if they're about to run under a car. So, and I can see, yeah, same thing. But I just wanted to just say, you can do, I know that you claim the farmer's wife term proudly, as I do, or I'm wife to the farm, really. But I just would like to ask you about your expression in art, because there's this beautiful place in your book where you involve the whole community with an art project that feeds your soul, no doubt, and the community. So you're feeding the community with art.
So, there's a story in the book about when we hosted a fundraiser for the hospice that cared for James's dad as he was dying after he'd gone, and we hosted a stock judging competition because we're very proud stock people. We have Herdwick sheep and Belted Galloway cattle, and when you have a stock judging event in your sheep shed, everybody comes regardless of whatever the weather's doing. And it was a blizzard, it was December, it was a snowstorm, and we were blown away with 70 farmers turning up from all across the north of England to come and, you know, chew the fat over looking at some prize sheep in the pens. There was a lot of whiskey consumed, yes, to keep us warm, apparently. And I cooked for that because when people come to our farm, I mentioned it yesterday, cooking for people is my way of showing love. It's my way of caring for my family and my community and making everybody feel welcome and nourished. So the week before was very stressful. It always is with these events, but organised, and I'd done the ham hock broth, and I was serving that, and loads of people brought baked goods, and it was such a wonderful party in the shed. And I said at one point, right, everybody, I've got a favour to ask. I really need you to help me with creating a public artwork. There's a trail going around the Lake District of fiberglass sheep, and they were life-size models that artists were given to paint and decorate any which way you wanted to. And my idea was that that the shepherds and shepherdesses in the area would place their hand in some cold paint in a tray and press their handprints onto this sheep. And we've got a long tradition in the lakes of what we call smit marking, which is, I don't know if you do this in Tassie in Australia. We daub paint colours onto our sheep in a certain way, and we have a flock book for the Lake District, and each farm has its own smit mark. So it was representing that smit mark, but it was also put in the hands of the people that care for the landscape onto this piece of artwork. And they were all really baffled and puzzled, like, why were you treating us like kids, Helen? And it's like back to play group, put your hand in the paint. And they were like, oh, what are we going to do with this? And they pressed their hands, and there was some with crooked fingers, gnarly hands that wouldn't go flat. And just the magic of seeing those hands all represented on this sheep was wonderful. And it looked very basic and very colourful and very simple. But I called the piece In Safe Hands because the shepherding people of our area really do. They care deeply. They're passionate about the landscape. They build the walls. They look after the flocks. They look after their families. And it was just bringing all of those strands together in this piece of work. And it really meant a lot to me. And it was a lot of fun to do. And then it was auctioned off for the charity at the end. And we had a great time, and lots of whiskey was drunk. But that's just one of the stories in the book that I shared. And just when you're talking about food and getting people interested, I think we're both really passionate about storytelling and writing and wanting to share, like, how much, like, regenerative farming matters. And we're all on different paths and different journeys of understanding that. And for me, I had just going a little step back to what you were saying before, Rachael, I had a sort of moment in our fields when we're working with a lady called Caroline Grinrod that's helped us an awful lot on the farm. And she talked about nutrition, like Fred's work, in just a different way, about what goes into the animals, nourishes them, and they need a wide variety of natural, like, no chemicals and no pesticides and anything else, and how they're gonna self-medicate, they're gonna feed themselves what they need. And so she'd been influenced by Fred, and it's amazing to hear your story with that. And then it linked me going back into my kitchen and looking around, and I was reading Animal Vegetable Miracle by Barbara Kingsolver at the time as well. Yeah, I love Barbara Kingsolver, yeah. And we were lucky enough for her to come to the farm last summer. Sorry, name drop. But I was reading that and how she was cooking from scratch local things that she was growing and trying to feed everybody in that way. And from that moment on, I've had a real light bulb sort of change in the way I think about what we're growing and how we're nourishing ourselves and how we can communicate that to the people that don't even give what they're eating a second thought that day. And you see all the time with these dreadful protein shakes that people fill up with and carry on the street in the morning and think that that's going to give them the nutrients that they need, but it's not from soil, is it? It's not. And I just think there's such a disconnect in any which way that we can. And all of you got a role to play in this of telling stories and engaging people. And I was talking to Jo yesterday that's doing a lot of the social media, and she was really brilliant at saying she can bridge that gap between the farmers and the producers, and we can do that with our writing, and artists can do that with their pieces of work. Let's ask the questions, let's share, let's keep on at the world, like keep banging the drum in our own ways, and we need every single strand of that. Whatever your specialist subject, whatever your passion is, it's finding your way. I've gone off on a bit of a tangent there, but
I think we've been tangenting.
Yeah, we have. Which is yeah.
And talking about getting the message out, people say, oh, you write rural romance, and I like, sorry, because Jillaroo was actually about succession planning and rural youth suicide, and there was a romantic story that carried that story, but it kick-started the rural women's literature genre, which is now more kind of, buffed, outbacky boys. It's more romance. But so I was getting frustrated about the slow, delivery of the message. So I did my very first stand-up comedy gig in Melbourne on Saturday, right? Yes. So it's called, the organisation it's a woman in Berlin that runs it, and it's Sustainable Stand-Up, and she teaches you comedy that steers you away from the fear that so many people have and places you in that place of comedy and hope. And so I had a fully urban audience. There were vegans, vegetarians, and in the audience, and I introduced myself, I'm Rachael from Tasmania, regenerative farmer, novelist, poo enthusiast, and a sexy soils addict. And so the set rolls on from there. But I talk about Ripple Farm, where we've got Stuart Andrews is putting these amazing contours. We've planted it out with diverse species. We're rotationally grazing. We're doing all of that. And we have kids come to the farm, and then we point to the industrial salad leaf farm across the way that kills every single living thing. And they actually have a concrete sump at the base of the property to capture and wash the tractors, and everything's blasted with methyl bromide. So we had an audience of urban people, and I'm able to say, here are our cows, evil cows that are going to fart and kill us. Here are our cows with our microbiome, cycling that soil. So in a 9-minute set, making people laugh and making them not feel threatened by this divide, it was really powerful, but also terrifying. Yeah. So I'm just, that's another way. But I'm no timekeeper, so here she's marching down. But so do you think it's nearly question time? No, no toy party questions, please.
How are we doing for time, Laura? We would love some questions from...
Sorry, I'm yelling from the back of the stage. Can I also ask you to repeat the question into the microphone? So it gets recorded?
Thank you. Great. Hi.
For Rachael, the 50 bars of hay, what was that really about?
The 50 bars of hay. So we're talking about titles. Yeah, 50 Shades of Grey came out, and I made it to chapter 3, and I thought, oh my God, this is the same stuff. So we went to a friend's 50th birthday party, and we were sitting around a campfire, and everyone's going, all right, you should write something, you should. And so we came up with a dirty dozen around that campfire at a party, and I wrote a collection of short stories, and they're at Hobart Booksellers. Support your independent booksellers, by the way. Bronwyn's here been lugging boxes for 3 days. So just in the dairy down here, go and buy everyone's book, because books are in trouble. It's seriously, the book industry is in trouble thanks to the corporate giants. It's really similar to farming. And so anyway, I digress. Thank you for, and then so AgFest is our Tasmanian field day, and I stopped going there pretty much because it's like, how big's your boom spray? You know, what are you, like, and so, but what? Anyway, moving along. So I did. It was a really bad year farming wise, and it was a drought. So my friend and I did a colouring book, and it's 50 Shades of Grey, and it's an adults only colouring in book. Which So that's how that came about, because humour it just cracks people open. It stops their mind going around and being defensive. So humour is it, and you know, if you make jokes about sex and poo, it's good for everyone.
Where do I go with that? Next question. Hi.
I really enjoyed your book. For me, it was extraordinary that you wrote about what's also the ordinary for me, having grown up on a farm in the Lakes. Mm-hmm. And growing up on a small family farm is such a wonderful experience. But with the current decline in small family farms, do you think memoirs like yours and memories that many of us have from smaller family farms or farming upbringings, are they becoming only memories, or do you think there's a changing tide of more people turning to a farming lifestyle? And Tassie's a great example of people having tree changes and coming back to the land. What do you think the future looks like for the small farming family?
What do I think the future looks for the small family farm? It's a great question. It's tricky, isn't it? We're up against it in the UK. We're being fired arrows at farming by all directions. We've got dreadful things in place right now with the fight for inheritance tax to be lifted, if that's possible, because the land values are inflated. It's ridiculous what we're having to cope with. Subsidies are just a mess. Small family farms are struggling, and we're huge advocates for fighting for them, James and I. We've been at the protests in London 2 weeks ago. James has spent a lot of time writing pieces, articles, lobbying people, politicians. We've invited ministers. We've had ministers at the farm. We need everybody that's connected with the land and growing food to be shouting loud. We're such a tiny minority now. It's really challenging. I would certainly hope that this isn't the end. I think farming people are tough and stubborn and are from stock that have been around a long time, and we're not going without a fight. We're not going quietly. I want a future for our kids if they want to do it. I'm not pushing farming onto you in any way, shape or form, but it's the childhood you've had and are experiencing is about real life stuff, real soil and animals and life and birth and death and food. You're really connected with it, and sense of responsibility and putting yourself second quite a lot of the time and getting on with the jobs on the farm. And that's really, really important for our young people, that they learn basics of life, how to grow stuff and how to look after livestock. I'm an optimist. I've got a lot of hope that the end of small farms isn't nigh. I think it does have a future. And which way we can to shout about that and protest and say how important it is matters. Because I think we need more people on the land than ever before in small scale farming. It's so important. So I just hope that we can keep going and not let this tidal wave of industrial ways kind of drown us. Any other questions? Hi, Laura.
Two things. The first thing is that, to that point, if anybody else is interested in a discussion about that, the next session in this tent is about succession.
Excellent.
Which actually talks directly to the idea of how we deal with land and land inheritance and who takes it over and how we keep people farming.
Okay, so the next session is about succession. So everybody can come and join in with that and think about the next generation. There's a growing population of young people in our area that are super passionate stock people. They're looking at their options and like, do we want to leave this beautiful landscape where we live and go and work in town in dead-end jobs that are, you know, treated like dirt? We're getting like 0 hours contracts for payment, and they're looking at that going, I'd rather gather the fell with the dogs. And our daughter 17 is proudly doing that. She's, you know, really passionate about, she just got a Kelpie pup last week that's 8 weeks old. Oh, look at this. We've got a dog training book ready to go. Rachael is your woman. If you need anything, find her on the field. You can buy it in the shop. Honestly, any more questions before we... Right, okay, Laura's got a question.
This morning, if you cover this, forgive me, I was in another session. It's a very interesting subject, this subject of women's work and how we negotiate that. And as a feminist and someone who's juggled, I've raised 3 sons, I've run a business, very connected with food. I have a great commitment to... I have to keep this short and take my medicine out.
No, I love this.
Anyway, the point is, I guess, I find it fascinating, my response to your work. Your work is actually championing the role of a woman who plays that supporting, it's not a supporting role, you're legitimising the role of the work that you've done. But as a feminist who's fought so hard for my role to take my place, you know, in the spotlight to do the work and run a business, it's quite interesting how I feel about your work. I'm really impressed and proud by your courage and the way you've owned what you do. But I also worry about legitimising the domestic role of women because we fought so hard to come out of the kitchen.
It's really interesting, isn't it? We have fought hard to get out the kitchen, and we shouldn't all, like, there's no bit of my work that says we're going back there. My work is about empowering women to make the choices that they want to make, that they live the lives that they want to live, and do things I said this yesterday, just because we're women, it doesn't mean we all think the same. We're all going to come at things from different angles and have different sort of value systems. But for me, my way was to hold societal expectations away and do it my way. And I would say quite openly that everybody's got to find their own way of doing things and feel supported and encouraged to do that their own way, in whatever that looks like. I wrote this because I didn't feel that I could find a book that I felt seen and heard in. And for me, quite a lot of feminism over the years has looked down its nose at women like me.
Yes, well said. I'm going to clap that.
And I'm sort of fighting back with this as a bit of a manifesto to say, this is important work too. And all of it counts. All people's experiences count. And we really need to celebrate this as much as anything else.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm not sure how we're going for time, but I had a really quick question. We have a bit of a window into the world of English agriculture through Clarkson's Farm with Jeremy Clarkson, you know, and his wife or partner Lisa. You can see how capable she is, and he's a bumbling around. But I wanted to ask you about, I just wanted to ask you about how has that impacted the release of your book and your book, James, because it's really been so successful in Australia.
We were in Canada about 2 years ago, and the guy was watching Clarkson's Farm in his house. He was like, it's gone worldwide, hasn't it? And for all his faults, and there's many, we could list them. What Jeremy has done for farming has been phenomenal. To get that on mainstream TV and everybody talking about the economics, the realities, what people are, the challenges of the weather, the challenges of, like, literally the bureaucracy, the nonsense of the paperwork. And I did a piece for the BBC Radio not too long ago. I recorded something about Lisa. That's so brilliant that you've brought that up, because I talked about Lisa. In that how fantastic it is to see her rising up and basically owning the whole thing in the last series. She was the boss. He really was bumbling around, making a complete tit of himself as usual. And we thoroughly enjoyed watching it. And it's just... But Lisa, raising those piglets, looking after things, asking the questions, running the farm shop, dealing with all of that. That represents women on farms for me. That was really brilliant. And I'm super, super happy that series has gone worldwide. And yeah, there's many, many faults with him, isn't there? But well, as we said before, we need all the voices we can get to champion farming and practices and trialing things and challenges and sharing that. And that's just one of them. So, yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, brilliant.
Oh, honestly, we started with 6 people. We did. We are absolutely blown away that we've nearly filled the tent. I feel really happy. You want to get Rachel's book. So thank you so much. Thank you, Laura, for hosting the tent. Thanks everybody for coming along. Thanks for Rachael for being a great sport and doing this conversation with me so far away from home. But I've got a new friend that we write books with the same title. It's been a joy. I hope everybody has a wonderful day. There's some incredible speakers on going forwards, and our minds are... my mind is blown after yesterday, so I don't know how you're all coping. But Laura, you've said a brilliant idea. Write one thing from each presentation you go to and look back on it and yeah, have a great time. And this is my last event, so can you tell how happy I am? Hey!